I was born in Houston, Missouri, came out right after the war on a train with my mother because my dad and two older sisters drove out. There wasn't room for me. And I grew up in Pendleton, Oregon. And it was really a good break. My dad went to work for a lumber mill. My mother went to work for a sewing machine company. And it was they had really, really good schools in Oregon, or in Pendleton, led by really smart people. So I got a really good education, very solid foundation. Then went to school, started college at Eastern Oregon College and LeGrand. Then moved to Portland and finished up at Portland State University. I loved math and science. Probably because I was pretty good at it, and probably because I had really good teachers at the time. So we were in the advanced class in math all through. And then when I went to college, I graduated in general studies. I took everything because I was working at the time and had a wide range of interests. It was a fun time. I have a general studies background. I had just graduated from college. I was married and I needed a job. And they offered me one, and I took it. And at that time, government wasn't as maligned as much as I think it is today. It was on the heels of John Kennedy's expression, "Ask not what you can do, but what you can do for your country." And so there was a little bit of that feeling. So it was a job that I was qualified to do, I thought, and I took it. Had a good time. The Legislative Fiscal Office was created in 1959. I went to work there in 1969. That was probably the best break I ever had, was the opportunity to go to work for them. And its function was to provide independent and complete analysis for the legislature. Before, they were totally reliant on information provided by the executive department, which may have left them a little short of where they needed to be. And so they hired us. At the time, we were the only professional full-time staff in the legislature other than legislative counsel. And there were about 8 of us in the office, CPAs, attorneys, well-respected group of people. We were assigned agencies. And starting out, I had most of our natural resource agencies. So our job was to spend a lot of time in those agencies learning about what they did and what their issues were, what their problems were. Then that gave us enough of a background so that when they came to the emergency board during that interim, needing an adjustment to their budget, we could analyze that and determine, or not determine, but make a recommendation to the legislature based on the data, whether it was a good idea or whether certain pieces of that needed to be improved. The larger project was the analysis of the governor's budget. The governor has to, by law, provide the legislature with a copy of their budget, I think by December 1st of the year prior to the session meeting. And we'd get advance copies of that from the agencies, and we would analyze that. And then we would publish, coincident with the governor's publication, the Legislative Fiscal Analysis. So the legislature had 2 documents. They had what was being proposed by the executive, and then they had our analysis of that budget. What it gave me was an opportunity to really learn basically every facet of government and the mechanics of how it worked and what the opportunities were. If you knew the law, you could do a lot of things that ignorance would prevent. One time or another, I was assigned that budget and got to know it very well, which helped me out a lot going forward. The law says that in the capital of Salem, you should locate government buildings on the Capitol Mall. And there was a plan that was laid out that decades ago. And the reason was that you could, for the convenience of the public, they could find it, and for the economy of scale that you could do to maintain it. And that hadn't been followed for a long time because there wasn't really a way to finance the construction of those buildings. And so we were leasing buildings all over the city of Salem. And so in order to move to that expectation or that vision, we had to kind of come up, number one, with a financing source, because the plan was almost always there. There's a full-time commission, it's called the Capital Planning Commission, and it's a group that their job is to do what you would imagine, make sure that the capital is developed in a rational way that satisfies the ultimate design, not scattered all over and that kind of thing. So the vision was already there. They didn't have the funding mechanism. All of this was done in concert with the Capital Planning Commission. We put together a group from around the state, business leaders, community leaders, students, college students, high school kids, to come up with a vision of what that ought to look like, because we're going to tear the existing one all up and put it back together. And they did a really good job with that. And I'd remembered reading about an underground parking lot during Hatfield's time. Somebody had that idea. And so we said, okay, that's what we got to do. We got to solve the parking problem. So we put together a team of people, architects, engineers, major contractors, and others, and sat down and said, okay, is this feasible, number one? And we sorted that out, and we came to the conclusion that it was. They helped us with the design. After that, with the parking structure in place, we proceeded to build the Department of Human Resources building and the Archives building on the mall. Before then, Oregon's history was buried in an old leaky warehouse in downtown, and nobody knew where anything was. It was scattered all over everywhere. But now it is. You can go out and find stuff, as you know, that you need to find on occasion to kind of see what really did happen way back when. Well, the lottery, up until the installation of video poker games, was a little kind of a boutique agency. It really didn't create a whole lot of revenue with scratch tickets and those kinds of things, Keno and a few things like that. Video lottery was the big hit. It went from about $50 million a year up to about 750, about 50 million a biennium is my memory, up to about 750 million. And in the wake of ballot measure 5, it became a very large part of school funding. It softened that quite a bit. Well, it was an agency that because it had grown so fast, it had kind of outstripped its infrastructure. And it was housed in an old building that was owned by Morrow Crane. People were literally working up in the attic and around. And the computer that handled all of the video poker transactions was housed on a concrete floor, which is 2 feet below the flood level plain in that particular area. And it was about the size of a quarter of this room. It was a huge thing. It was a prototype. It was the only one in the world that handled that. So if anything happened to it, it would have taken us months to get back on our feet. And meanwhile, guess what would happen to school funding? And so we started right away to figure out a way to back the computer up, which we did. We built a center over in Eastern Oregon so that there was some backup. The other thing that we needed to do was to build a place to put that together, because that building was completely in it. We'd outgrown it 5 times over. So notwithstanding all the other buildings that we'd built, I proposed to the governor that they construct that. And Debs Potts, who was the chairman of the Lottery Commission at the time, he and I met with Governor Kitzhaber, the governor-elect, and told him that. Pressed on him to put that in his budget, and he did. And so the lottery now, thanks to all the hard work of people before me, are housed in a decent place and now become a major part of the state revenue package. I love puzzles and problems, and that's really what management is. And if you see a problem and you're in a position of responsibility, that's your obligation to figure out the next best thing to do, and that's what we did on a full-time basis. Never let it rest. There was an old teacher I had. She said, good, better, best, never let it rest. Till your good is better and your better is best. Kind of corny, but it's worthwhile. Don't try to navigate. You always try to do the right thing. And if you try to navigate, you're gonna lose, because you're gonna, unless you can justify what you do on a basis of math, as far as general services is concerned, you're gonna fail. If you try to solve based on what you think somebody else might want to do, you'll fail. I do know that, every Oregonian, from the time they wake up till the time to go to bed, is touched by some function of government, whether it's the air they breathe, or the water they drink, or the food they eat, or the way they get to and from work, or the quality of the doctor that they seek treatment from, and so on. All of that is regulated and to some extent or influenced by state government. So if they don't know, they should, because it's an important aspect. You take a pledge to do the best job as you can, and that's what we tried to do, and that's what we're hard to do. And as I said earlier, it was kind of a we endeavor. You get together a group of people to solve a complex problem, and you usually come together and create an inspired solution that satisfies the political stuff. So if the legislature, and during my tenure with them, they did the same thing. They'd get together, they were interested in doing the best thing that they could for the state, and at least from my perspective, they did.